Pretty good this week, Rachel. Pretty good.
Let's just dive in. What are we talking about this week?
Well, okay, so there's a couple things that I think might be interesting to let people know about, and that is some updates to, or I guess maybe update's not the right word. Maybe it's how to use our website and talk about some resources we put out there that are not just the podcast feed. So, for instance, one thing that we just recently released is that I wrote a blog post. I asked you to review it and give some edits, so thank you for doing that. But we just released a blog post on the specific language system first approach. It occurred to me through conversations with some colleagues that I have done presentations on it. There's podcasts, plenty of podcast episodes about it. There's videos of me discussing it. There's, like I said, live presentations where I've done it with slide decks. There's flowcharts that explain what it might look like. But there was never just a prose, like, here's what it is written out in an article. And so I had actually written one a while back and just never published it. So I thought, okay, let's dust that sucker off. Let's get some other eyeballs on it to make sure that it's the way we would want it. And then I put it out as a blog post on our website. So if you go to talkingwithtech.org, at the top, there's a link that says blog. You can see that there are actually two posts currently. One talks about some episodes that have AAC users in it, and then there's this blog post that explains the specific language system first approach.
Okay. I love the blog. I edited it for you, Chris. I feel like you did an amazing job of breaking down these concepts. For our new listeners who are like, what is the specific language first approach? I have no idea what he's talking about. Go.
If this is your first episode of listening to the Talking with Tech podcast, you might not know what this is. So my first suggestion is listen to the last couple, because it's described really well in the last couple episodes where a school district was thinking about bringing this approach on, and they asked me some questions, and so I describe it. The second thing that I'll say there too, Rachel, is that I think this actually leads to another strategy for how to use our website. So if you go to our website and you click search, you can type in specific language system first approach or whatever. If you wanted to search motor planning, if you wanted to search aided language stimulation, and it will pull up all of the episodes that have keywords associated with that topic. And so you could build, and I think some people do this, a little bit of a playlist for yourself. So, okay, the specific language system first approach, that real quick to answer your question, Rachel, explicitly there, that is the idea that before doing an assessment, you are choosing a tool that is just available to everybody. We call it a tier 1 tool. And then you can always tweak it from there if that's not the right tool or the right fit. And it's a robust language system as opposed to just a handful of core vocabulary words randomly placed on a board. It is a robust language system. So that's we're in an elevator together, and I've got, 30 seconds to tell you what that is. But if you want the deep dives, well, one, read the article, but two, you can go listen to us talk about it in different podcast episodes by doing that, by using what I just said there, doing a search of the podcast and find any topic you're interested in.
And I'm just going to add to that. The reason that function works so well, shout out to Luke, who writes all of our show notes for this podcast. Without him, you wouldn't be able to search any of our episodes. So the reason that it's searchable is because he does such a fantastic job every week of listening to our episode and writing the show notes, including all the links that we talk about and the tools, all the contact information for the guests we have. So it's really awesome that we now have a website that is so searchable. And I have to tell you, Chris, I'm constantly searching our own website because I'm like, what was that one episode about that one thing? It's super helpful. And Chris and I do a lot of presenting, and we are really eager to share episodes of the podcast that support some of the concepts that we're talking about, because if I have an hour to do a speaking event, I don't have time to go into detail about motor planning sometimes, or, aided language input, core words, but it's really nice to link to episodes where we talk at length about some of those concepts. So for people who are interested in learning more, they have a way to, learn and listen and get more information about specific topics.
I just gave two webinars for an organization up in Oregon, and that's exactly what my almost every other slide is like. Here's a concept, and then then down in the bottom it says listen to learn, and it links to a podcast episode. And here's the thing about that, Rachel. This is what I'd like to invite our listeners to do. You and I do that. We share that. We're the co-hosts of this podcast. There's absolutely no reason you couldn't do that as well. It's just like linking a YouTube video or linking to a research article. You can take the hyperlink, link some text, and say you want a deeper dive into this particular topic. Go listen to what Chris and Rachel or the people that we've interviewed have to say on this particular topic. It gives your presentation that you're doing even more legs, It gives it even more substance, and it gives even more credence to what you're saying. So we invite you to link to the podcast episodes.
Yeah, and I just think it's a really nice way for people to learn. I mean, we've had a lot of people reach out and say, I love your podcast. It's so great. I listen to you on my drives and, while I'm cooking and taking walks, with my family, or, there's lots of ways to learn. And I feel like what's so nice about the podcast is it's just another way to consume information. And Chris and I try to keep it fun while informative. So yes, we definitely would invite you to share podcast episodes that really resonated, and then help, again, build out concepts that you're trying to teach. Because I know a lot of AAC specialists out there do a lot of professional development. We're all kind of trying to the best we can to teach people about AAC. And so, yes, we invite you to share podcast episodes and definitely use that search feature because it's really nice. And like I said, I use it all the time.
All the time. Now, speaking of teaching people about AAC and doing webinars, well, we have an experience coming up in a couple months. On October 7th and October 8th, we are doing a pre-conference for Closing the Gap. And that pre-conference is called Designing and Delivering Empowering Experiences to Teach Language Using AAC. Rachel, let's talk about it. What would, if people were going to come to that presentation, what would they experience?
Well, one of the things I love about the pre-conferences, Chris, is it's a smaller, more intimate group of people. And so I feel like we leave that pre-conference with some new AAC besties. I feel like the people we've done pre-conferences with, I'm like, oh, I know you. We're friends now. And so I feel like that's nice because we have the opportunity to really connect with one another. And I feel like in our field, we're kind of always in a silo. It feels like I'm always kind of just the lone soldier talking about AAC. And so it's really nice to have that collective experience. It's a lot of talking about how we can get kids motivated to communicate, best practice in AAC. It's really just a lot of discussion around how we can be better communication partners. We touch on coaching. There's a ton of information in there that we basically go into more of a deep dive. I feel like one of my challenges when I'm doing any type of speaking event is I typically only have an hour or 2 hours. And this is just all of our best stuff, spread out across 2 days. And I'm just really excited because I feel like we've had such a great experience in the past and super excited that we're going to be presenting this for Closing the Gap.
Another strategy there, if you were thinking about maybe attending, or if you were maybe thinking, well, you know what? I mean, I listen to Chris and Rachel every week. I don't know necessarily that I need to go and go to a pre-conference. This might be the sort of thing that you share with someone that you work with, or you share out on social media with with peers that you collaborate in, your professional learning network, where you might say, we've been having these discussions. You might really benefit from this. So we would appreciate you sharing this hyperlink. It's bit.ly/designAAC. That's where people can go read all about it and then register for the experience.
I also want to add, Chris, that you and I are really passionate about creating experiences that you have to be in person to benefit the most from. So if you watch a recorded session, you're going to feel oh my gosh, I missed out because they're doing so many cool activities and engagement and having such great conversations. So this is definitely not a sit and get type of situation. It's super interactive. We have tons of activities. And what's really exciting as the presenters, I feel is we don't really know how it's going to go. It's it could go off in, one direction based on what everybody in the group is saying they need more guidance with or support. Sometimes, a question will come up and we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive. And so we've kind of created an experience that is really flexible to the group of people that we're working with. If you watch the recorded version, not that there is a recorded version of this, but if there was, you would be oh man, it's just not as cool because I wasn't there.
100%. The conversations that happen are where a lot of the meat comes from. A lot of the practical application comes from people talking about their real life experiences. And then, like you said, we've designed it so that there is this interactive piece is built in so that one can happen in an ancillary way, but it can happen in a very structured design way. So again, that website, if you're interested in learning more or if you're wanting to share it, it is bit.ly/designAAC. Again, bit.ly/designAAC. So Rachel, let's talk a little bit about something else that we've got going on, and that is this ongoing website that we maintain called Patreon, right? And so the Patreon experience is something that we invite people to pay whatever they can per month. We ask for $8 a month, but it really could be less or it could be more. That's just sort of our ballpark, kind of middle of the road, what we're sort of asking. And when people pay for that, what do they get, Rachel?
They get so much. At this point, we've had the Patreon for over a year now, and every week we try to upload some piece of content, whether that's a therapy idea. I'm sharing a lot of my resources that are for sale on my website. I give them to our Patreon members for free. There's behind the scenes, clips of episodes. There's video content. We release some of the content that's eventually going to be released on the podcast. We release it in the Patreon right away. And so if you are super eager to get content that is going to be released, in a few months up front, you would definitely enjoy the Patreon. And we just try to keep it super practical, and there's tons of different ideas on lots of different topics. And at this point, if you join, you literally have like over a year worth of content to go back and to access and to watch and to listen to, and resources that, we've shared. There's also the Talking with Tech Live, which I would love Chris to get something on the books for another live event, because that was so amazing to connect in real time with all of our Patreon members. I just love that experience, and I feel like there was just this energy after that event. And I just felt super connected to our audience, and just really grateful too. We have an amazing community of listeners. So thank you guys so much for listening. And the Patreon really is a way to keep this podcast afloat. Without your financial support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And so we are just super appreciative of any type of donation that you can give. We have a team of people that help to make this podcast possible. Luke, our podcast producer, who writes our show notes and posts on social media for us and handles our website. And of course, Michaela is our audio engineer, who does a fantastic job of making Chris and I and our guests sound amazing every week. And so we really want to support our team, and we really appreciate all of our Patreon members. It's just like, it really warms my heart to think that people enjoy this podcast enough to give us $8 a month. And I'm just so grateful for that, because again, without that support, we wouldn't be able to do it.
So if that sounds intriguing to you, please check it out at patreon.com/talkingwithtech. Again, that's patreon.com/talkingwithtech. So Rachel, you ready to hear about the interview today?
Yes. Where are we going with this interview?
So this interview is with Colleen Warn, and Colleen works in New York City, and we talk about all sorts of stuff about what practice looks like in NYC, but it's really part of our ongoing effort to talk about diversity and look at bringing out equity in all the work that we do. And so, without further ado, let's listen to my interview with Colleen Warn. Great news, everybody. We're going to be presenting a pre-conference workshop for Closing the Gap called Designing and Delivering Empowering Experiences to Teach Language Using AAC.
This 6-hour virtual workshop takes place over 2 days, October 7th and 8th, from 1 to 4 p.m. Central Time on each day.
This interactive workshop explores strategies for teaching students of all ages language by engineering environments so all communicators have opportunities for rich, meaningful practice in the context of everyday routines.
Participants will get to explore how to design experiences using interactive technologies, which empower the student and their support network, putting them on the path to achieve their lifelong language goals.
During the workshop, we're going to take an in-depth look at building the skills of communication partners through structured training centered on both consulting and coaching.
We'll be sharing the latest tools and strategies for establishing a culture of language learning using AAC. Everybody loves engaging tools.
You can sign up now by going to bit.ly/designAAC. That's bit.ly/designAAC.
Can't wait to see you guys there.
Oh, and there's one more thing to mention, Rachel.
What's that, Chris?
I'm actually doing 2 pre-conferences on those days. I'll be presenting with the other authors of the new Inclusive Learning 365 book as well. The title of that pre-conference is Inclusive Learning 365, Breaking Down Barriers and Creating a Culture of Inclusivity by Design. That pre-conference is also on October 7th and October 8th, 2021, but it will be at 9 to 12 Central Time on those days. If you'd like to learn more about how to redesign educational experiences through an inclusive lens, then you can register for that pre-conference by going to bit.ly/inclusivectg. That's bit.ly/inclusivectg. Come spend the whole day with me. See you there. Record on the computer. Welcome to the Talking with Tech podcast. My name is Chris Bouguet, and I'm joined today with Colleen Warn. Am I saying your last name right, Colleen?
Yes, you are.
So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is the first time I've ever done this, so
excellent. Well, we're happy that this is your first experience, first of many, I hope.
Yes, I hope so too.
So, Colleen, you and I don't really know each other that well, but and that means that there might be people out there in the audience that want to learn more about you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Tell us a little bit about the team you work with, and kind of give us kind of a picture of who you are and what you do, and all the people you work with.
Sure. So my name is Colleen Warn. I'm by trade, I'm a pediatric physical therapist. I've been a pediatric PT for over 20 years, working with early intervention, school-age students. And I'm also a certified yoga teacher for the special child, which work with children with special needs. I love to travel. I love Star Wars. Who doesn't? And I also
This is the way, Colleen. This is the way.
That is correct. This is the way. And I also have a daughter, an 8-year-old daughter with CP, who also is an AAC user. So in addition, I also right now the team that I work for the New York City Department of Education. I've actually worked there since I graduated, so it's kind of like where I began my roots as a physical therapist. And I came back I left for a little while and came back as a director for the Assistive Technology team. So the team that I oversee, we have about 80 people on our team, some amazing people of OTs, PTs, and speech therapists. They're all AT specialists that do evaluations, training, and stuff. And we have a really diverse team, I have to say. So, we're really lucky to have that.
And that's really what we're going to talk about today. That's the kind of foreshadowing into our conversation about diversity and equity. But first, I have to ask you, because it seems like whenever you meet somebody from a state or from a particular region, you have to say, well, do you know so-and-so? And New York City, it's kind of like a small place. There's not many people there, so you probably all know each other. Do you know Mayor Chris Formosa?
Of course. Yeah, she's on my team. Yeah, so she's one of the supervisors, so I'm actually her boss. So
Gotcha.
So yeah, Mara Chris, Lindsay Huntley, and Joseph Piazza. He just became a supervisor last year. So they are the supervisors of the AT team, and I'm the director. Yeah, and then the rest of the team, the rest of the 77 are the ones that are in the field. They're on the ground.
So once upon a time, I probably did get to meet you just briefly, if not at a conference, but I was hired to come out and do a presentation for that particular team.
Oh, wow.
And so it was probably one of those things where you kind of came in and said, hey, hi, happy to be here, or happy to have you here. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And then you ran off and did the rest of the work while I did the presentation for the day. But all 3 of those people that you mentioned, I have great respect for them and the work that they've been doing. And so it's so great to meet you too, and dig
Yes.
deeper in. So one of my takeaways from doing that presentation, Colleen, was I would start to make some suggestions like, well, here's something that works in our neck of the woods. And people would go, yeah, not New York City. And one of the big takeaways that I came from that was that New York City is unique in the way that it's diverse. And that you're doing, meaning for a long time now, there's been a large mix of people living in a small concentrated area. And as the rest of the country tries to become more diverse and recognize equity as a meaningful goal, that seems like something that's been on your radar for a while, right? That's something
Absolutely.
that you've been working on. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what is that? If that's been a focus of your work, then like, why has it been that? How do you define that for people? Why is it important? Just kind of give us the whole spiel there.
Sure. So yeah, equity and diversity are two big, repeated conversations we have in the New York City Department of Education, because the New York City school system has really the most diverse, I think, racially and culturally diverse student population in the country. As you stated, it's a small city. I mean, it's not small, it's big, but it's small square footage wise. And there's a lot of different people. We have families and students from varying countries that have moved here, immigrated here. Some students are first generation or they're young transplants from another country. And it's something that the Department of Ed overall really is concerned about, making sure everyone has equitable access and diversity and et cetera. So some of the things that we've been working on and focusing is definitely like looking at, what does it mean to provide equity, right? What are we talking about, and what does, as you said, what does diversity mean, and I think diversity really is that we have such a variety, of different types of different people, different cultures, different languages, different customs, just very varying. And that's something to keep in mind when we're working with students and families in such in different ways, whether it's just teaching, remote learning, and even, with assistive technology. And I think we get more intimate when there's assistive technology. Sometimes there's some more intimacy. So it's even more important because we have to really play with that, that line of what their culture is and the diversity and et cetera. So the other part is, I think being in COVID made it so kind of even more apparent because we're now in their homes, whereas before the students came to a school and were mixed in, student may be Black or brown, Hispanic or Indian or Egyptian, and they would be in a school mixed in with other students. But now when we're doing remote therapy or remote, type of work, assistive technology work or training, we're in their home with them, with the students because they're at home. So these are kind of things that our team, I feel like I said, our team's pretty diverse. So we have good experience with working with that, but we continue building on that. And what we consider equity is really about making sure that students are getting the technology and support that they need. So my team's concerned about assistive technology, right? So what my team focuses on is make sure that students, regardless of where they live, what district they're in, what race or culture or gender identity, they're getting the same access to technology and supports that they should have, right? Regardless of all of that. And that's, we want to make sure we're able to do that. And what we've done so far is, I guess maybe we'll go into is what we've done is really, what it means is it doesn't matter where they live, what they look like, and everyone should get it efficiently as fast as everyone else. So I think some districts sometimes are pushier. And they may get it sooner and faster versus some districts that have parents that are working 3 jobs. They're not going to be pushing the schools as hard as a district that's different. And that's sort of what we don't want. We don't want that disparity, that just because you're in this district, you're going to get it a little bit slower than the other because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So equity really is, it doesn't matter. Everyone should have the same efficiency in getting their devices. So
can we dig into a little bit there, Colleen, and let's talk about some of the cultural differences. So, for instance, and recognizing those. So, like you said, COVID helped, I think, bring us into people's homes more than ever before. And I would imagine some experiences are very welcoming and others are less than that. And certainly that's been our experience in my neck of the woods. And part of that, I feel like in a place that in like New York City that is so diverse and has so many different cultures mixing together, what are some strategies to what's the right, let me put it a different way. Some cultures, independence is very highly valued. Yes. Other cultures, independence, not so much. You're part of this community. Why would you want to be independent? That's not, we've had that conversation before on this podcast with other guests, right? And so I wonder when you're invited into somebody's home, how you sort of tease out what's the right path to go. So one, you are not making presumptions, and then two, you are respecting their individual cultures.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, and I think one of the things our team does is, we always talk about that when we have meetings, that to be really vigilant about being open and observant and listen, and to be open-minded, that understand that this culture that this family is having may not understand that AT is support, and support is good for independence, right? Mm-hmm. Or, we've had a family where they want their child to talk, not use a device. The child's now 8, right, years old. And they're like, I don't understand. He's going to talk one day. So you have cultures that definitely think that having assistive technology is not right. Mm-hmm. Is we're giving them a crutch, you're letting them. So I think part of it is educating and understanding the parents, meeting them halfway, say, okay, we'll only use it for this right now, and because it's not going to be about arguing who's right and who's wrong, and that's definitely what you would avoid. We don't get into this, I'm right, I'm the specialist, I know what I'm saying, you're a parent who doesn't. We don't, that is right. Completely not the thing, not the way to go. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So people couldn't see that, but I pounded my fists together. You end up everyone feels frustrated, and it becomes a fight and a blame game, as opposed to this collaborative experience.
Yeah, So what we've had that's been successful is working with the speech therapist. So if it's an AAC situation, we would work with the speech therapist and say, okay, we'll only for now use it during, let's say, in class during group circle time or whatever they have in classroom discussion, and during speech therapy session. And then what we would do is document and show the parent, hey, look at how well he's doing, and continue building on that. I think that's the approach we usually try. And that usually works because it's working together with the family. I think is really listening to why they believe what they believe, and going, okay, that's okay. I get it. And just working with that, because we can't fight it. We try to educate them and show them, I think, how it works and how you're going to see the improvement, the speech come, and this child's going to be happy. I think that's less frustrated. So it eventually comes to that. So that's kind of one of the approach. I always say be open-minded, mm-hmm. and no expectations, really,
Something that has worked in our neck of the woods is leading with questions and then authentically listening. I found that has worked well for me, as opposed to coming in with my agenda and this is what we're going to do. And we can slightly move to my agenda because we do have some, in time. But if it starts with, okay, what's your biggest problem? Yep. How can we help you solve your biggest problem? now we can move on to, well, maybe one way to solve that problem. So usually it's centered around behavior, no matter what the culture and what
Yes,
the,
yes.
and so so let's say it's behavior. Well, what if we did this X, Y, or Z, or how do you think we could resolve this? And by the way, if we teach more language, then the behaviors will go down.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes, it's always oriented on behavior because children and students get frustrated when they're not able to communicate. So they feel unheard. People don't understand them. So yeah, that's awesome. I like the way you phrase it, leading with a question,
So, Colleen, I think there's lots of places around the country, and certainly my own school district is one that in the last 5 to 10 years have moved the needle a little bit when it comes to the conversation of equity from just general good ideas like these kind of buzzwords. Oh, we yes, of course we want things to be equitable, to more action steps with quantitative goals. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not just saying we want that, we're actually doing stuff around that. And so that leads me to a question. There's something that we say on the podcast quite a bit is design with the end in mind. Like, well, okay, so where are we going? What would we, so that's a question I'm going to lead to you, Colleen, is if we were designing with the end in mind, what does an equitable future really look like? What steps have you taken to achieve that?
Okay. So one of the things that we did was we get referrals from 32 districts, right? So we service the entire city, and we have 32 districts. And some districts have as high as 500 referrals in a year, and I have some districts that only have 20. That is a huge gap. The average would be about 120. So I would say what we did was we definitely saw that and we're like, wow.
Can I stop you there and
Sure.
just clarify? Because a lot of people listening, I think, are going to be speech therapists, teachers, and yes. I think I know what you mean by a referral. But let's see if we can explain that a little bit. So a school district has some sort of problem, and they contact you, and then one of your team comes out and brainstorms.
Yeah, so what happens is actually the school district, the IEP team at the school, so it could be from the parent or the IEP team, usually the student that has an IEP already, would say, hey, I tried all these supports already, whatever it is, OT, SETS provider, IEP teacher, we did the RTI interventions at MTSS. And we're at this point that we need more. We need assistive technology. Or the parent may have gone to see a doctor or spoke to their neighbor and said, hey, you should try to get them this laptop device with co-writer. So they would come in and say, we have a referral for an assistive technology evaluation. So that's basically what the referral means. And some school districts, as I mentioned, we have 32 districts. And some school districts have very high referrals. They refer over 300 in a year. And I have some other districts that refer less than 50 in a year, some as low as like less than 20. So we were like, why? Some districts are bigger than others, but that's a huge, that's like an outlier disparity. You're running from 500 to like 6. So
can I level the playing field just to make sure I'm clear too? I think across the country, school districts, some places have their own established assistive technology. Like in my neck of the woods, we have 10 people for our district that are assistive technology people. So I would see referrals to an outside source being a lot lower because we have. Do you feel like that's pretty equal with amongst all your districts? Is that we don't have AT teams.
No, they don't have. We are the AT team. Exactly. Yeah. That's what it is. We are the AT team, so they don't have one built into their school at all. And that's what we're actually working on that right now. We're working on building some school-based support on high incidence cases. That's something that we started this year, building that capacity. So no, there's no teams. So we are the team. So, and they basically are very hands off at, this is how AT, let's refer the AT team to come in.
Gotcha. And that's why, so those numbers really are equal. There's not another necessarily factor. Okay.
No, and it's it's kind of, so that as a result of that, we were like, wow, we have to do something. This is not equitable. And those districts happen to be the lower socioeconomic districts. So those are the districts that are.
And just to be clear, you're saying those districts that are lower in socioeconomic are the ones that are the 22, not the like, hey, we keep referring all the time.
Correct.
And we couldn't attribute it to these districts. Some districts have built capacity. It's just like they didn't even think about these supports. And how do we raise their awareness?
Correct. They're not exactly. So we identified them, and we basically are looking at it because these are these are the districts where there's a lower socioeconomic status. So the parents are maybe they're working 3 jobs. They may be single parents. They don't have that ability or the bandwidth or the knowledge really to know and push for and ask for assistive technology, right? Mm-hmm. Then it leads to the cycle of the school team, because they're not exposed to the ask, don't know anything about it either. What's this assistive tech? Whereas you're coming from a school district that has a lot of referrals from these parents asking for their child to get evaluated. They know what it is, mm-hmm. They're like, oh yeah, because you have to keep up to match the demand that's coming in to be able to have that conversation. But what we're seeing is these districts definitely they're not referring as much. It's not because there isn't a need. We're sure there's a need. And it may be just the way it is. It's just that they're not referring. No one's asking for it. They don't know what it is. So what we've done is we started I believe in 2019, we started targeting and having like a large PD, like a professional development, to talk to the staff that work in these districts. So like school staff, the school-based psychologist, the social worker, the IEP teacher, the OTs, the PTs, and the speech therapists, all the people that are interacting with the students and possibly the parents as well, to come in and learn about assistive tech, learn about instructional tech, learn about accessibility features. And we did both a lecture and a hands-on activity. So we set up stations and rotated them. It was really cool, but it was a good experience. It was a lot to feed them in that time, but it was almost like to get them a taste of it, and mm-hmm. So we did that in 2019. We did it again just before COVID in 2020. So these are large scale. Like I have over 200, like 300 people attending. Like they're really large. So, which is good, which is what we want. And what we've seen was that little district, we tracked the data, and after the first one we did, it might have had like 6 referrals. And the next year after that, they went up to like 12 or 20, and that's a big increase. So it's kind of like something, that was one way that worked. We continue doing more PD as well, because we're trying to target, so with the special ed liaisons that work directly with the principals and the assistive principals. So we also provided training to them, and also to some of the administrators of special education, so that they can support the school. So they are the direct support, the special ed support for for those schools. So educating them as well and talking to their team. So we definitely did a lot of that type of training. Now, on top of that, we also created almost like a mini ATIA, where we called it an AT Expo. And we had sessions. This was open to every provider. So this was open to every district, to come in and learn about AT. We brought in people, speakers and vendors, to come in and present. We had students as keynote speakers, and, trying to just spread the good word about assistive tech, instructional tech. And those are some of the ways I would say that we're continuing and have, worked on trying to bring some equity.
Let me ask you, Colleen, now, a lot of what you described there sounds like stuff you were doing pre-pandemic.
Yes.
And now the pandemic has hit, and We're in it now. At the time of this recording, it's not over yet.
No, not over.
So how has that changed? I mean, how
Sure.
has your initiative changed? What have you done to pivot and continue to help this wide breadth of people?
Yeah, I actually kind of mentioned it a little bit before. So one of the things we did pivot was really push for full steam ahead the high incidence assistive technology school capacity building. So building capacity of assistive technology in the schools, directly on the school-based team, and like what you had just mentioned, and utilizing and targeting the OTs and the speech therapists and the PTs, whoever work to be the ones to say, hey, you can learn a little bit more about some accessibility features and also some other tools that you have access to. You don't need to be in the AT team to access immersive reader. You can get read and write also for free. And just kind of and training them, building that capacity so that the school teams have some level of comfort of, hey, I know what this is. This student can benefit it and be able to do that at their level, like at their school. So we're working on that. We've been also working very closely with the occupational therapists. We just spoke to, I think, 3 districts that are in the low referring districts of the groups of therapists, and saying, hey, having this conversation with them and going to like a part 2, which will be some more. So it would be a remote training that we're doing with them, and giving them resources to have access to, so that they can be the front line at those schools in those districts to be able to look at a student and make a recommendation for AT.
So it really sounds like you're targeting your audience to instructors, meaning related service providers, educators, and then that is where the transition will then happen to the families that they serve. Does that sound accurate?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep, that's correct.
And are you doing trainings for families at this point too, or not really? It's really focused on just the educators.
So right now we're focused on the school staff first. The educators, the educators and the school staff are the first kind of line that we're going to. I eventually would like to provide, I think we've done like some more training for parents and inviting them. So that's something I would like to do. There was something else I was looking at. I know Mike Marotta offers a after hours, office hours for families, which is a really good idea. So that's something I have to kind of run by my boss and see if we can do that, because I think that might be really helpful for families. And I have to discuss how can I target the families in those districts, though, in the districts that, I know the high referral districts, those parents will just be at 8 o'clock. I will be there.
Yeah, they're going to show up, and they have the time to, right?
Yes, yeah, they have the time. Exactly. They're not, they're not necessarily families that are working, single family raising, their kids, a large family with or whatever it is with their circumstances different. They're not holding 3 jobs or working jobs that have long shifts. Yeah, so that's one of the things I have on my list that I would like to definitely try out, is to offer some sort of office hours for families after regular hours, after like in the evenings, to accommodate their schedule, or maybe on the weekend, something like that, and find a way. Yeah.
I got to say, Colleen, we have started to do that more as well. So pre-pandemic, we did a bunch of after school trainings available to families, like come, and we got classic. I'm sure you're going to know, like classic, a lot of people to sign up and very few people to show up, and we recognize life is busy, like for everybody, but and there are certain things in different cultures that you don't give up. Do you know what I mean? Like we are going to be around the family and have dinner from
Yep,
5 to
at this
6.
time.
It does not matter that the training is at 6 o'clock. Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
That is in our world, that's more important than that. Do you know?
Yep.
That'll have much longer lasting legs than going to this hour-long training at the school district with people that I don't even know. Do you know? So even before the pandemic, Colleen, we were like, well, what if we put it online, right? Like more people would sign in. But again, we sort of thought we have this presumption that, well, everybody knows technology. They'll just get on the computer. But again, that's kind of a false presumption, right? But not anymore. Do you know?
Yes, correct.
Like the pandemic has forced many cultures and many socio-economic classes to raise their technology skills. Do you know what I mean? Kind of universally.
100%. And I have agree with that. And I have to say, like, so prior to COVID, there was this grand agenda, not from our department, but from the Department of Education on technology equity. Meaning, as I mentioned, some districts are one-to-one and many districts are not one-to-one with devices. This is instructional iPads and stuff like that. So part of what they wanted to do was to launch that. COVID pushed it ahead because we're pretty much one-to-one. I think they're still working on the last batch to go out to get out to every student. But that you're right. It actually everyone now has pretty much all the families and students have had experience with some sort of technology device and a remote learning platform, some sort of classroom, digital classroom, right? Digital books, and video conferencing. So yes, everyone can. So that's good.
In our limited training that we've done so far for parents in this, I have one coming up next week.
Okay.
Again, we have a lot of people signed up. So we're going to see if the proof is in the pudding. Will more people show up? Do you know what I mean? Because they don't have to leave their house and they can blur their backgrounds and you're not taking away time and you don't have to find a babysitter necessarily. Do you know what I mean? We are anticipating a greater outcome. Getting technology to people was a barrier in the past. And a question that I asked myself, Colleen, is, geez, when COVID hit, we had no problems just like solving that problem. Like you said, same thing, like one-to-one initiatives just popped up everywhere. People have been talking about it and wrestling with it. And then it was just
Yes.
And same thing with, in our neck of the woods, it was hotspots. I don't know if you had to wrestle with the same.
Yeah, they did. Yes, they did the LTE enabled iPads as the hotspots. So it was a 2-in-1.
Yeah.
So the iPads had the cell service. So yes, that was also an issue too.
And then it just makes me wonder, like, well, we always had the solution. Like, what took us so long to do it? Like, it took a pandemic to get us to provide this sort of equitable service to everybody. Like, we knew people didn't have internet access. Why weren't we doing it before? Do you know?
Yes.
And so I hope that's a lesson we learn, is not wait for the next big disaster. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
To push the equity needle forward.
Absolutely. Agreed. And in our city, I mean, being really large, we have a lot of students in shelters who have no internet at all. So it was definitely one of the driving points as to why they had to get the hotspot enabled devices out to those students and those families, so that, and because of that, some students are able to basically connect their assistive tech to the remote learning device that has the cell service to be able to access and stuff and use it together. So it's not perfect, but I would say that overall, it's definitely, it took a pandemic to get everyone equitable access, to some sort of internet here.
Colleen, let me ask you this too. Is this similar experience, is that you had mentioned there were certain technologies that are just sort of accessibility tools. They're built into devices. You had mentioned specifically like Immersive Reader, which is like a feature of many Microsoft products, and they partner with, for people listening that don't know, it's on many websites that are kind of, they partner with many instructional tools to provide this feature. Is that something that you've noticed too? Is that you tend to start with the technology that the teachers have and that they're familiar with, rather than say, well, here's this new technology that you've never, or I shouldn't say new, but because it might be new to them, but here's this thing that you didn't have access to before. Do you start with that, or do you start with here's the stuff that's already like in your house or in your computer? You know?
So we always try to start with what you already have so that it's something that everyone has, is not something different than another student, right? We always call the least restrictive approach, so it's so we always start there, and there's so many great accessibility built-in features into the three main platforms we use are Microsoft, Google, and OS, which is a Mac operating system. So and iOS, the iPad. So OS/iOS operating system. So on those three platforms, there's so many built-in features into Microsoft Office, as Office 365. The students have access to Immersive Reader. The staff have access to that. They also have access to the Google Classrooms and everything that's built into their dictation, right? Text to speech, right? And on the Apple iPads, which are majority of the remote learning devices the students received across the city, they have an iPad. And those have all the built-in accessibility features as well to enlarge the text, right? Or spoken content they can use. So sometimes it's just bringing awareness to families, students, and staff that these features are there. You actually can use it and try it and see if it helps, because it helps many people. It helps, helps students, it helps adults, it helps me. I enlarge my font a little bit. So so we start there before we kind of move to something more specific or more, a different level of technology.
Colleen, when we're watching The Mandalorian over and over again, we have the captions on. Do you know what I mean?
You have to have the captions on. I was traveling. I was in Vermont over the weekend. We were watching on Netflix, and I'm fumbling with the remote. Like, I need the closed captions on. And it's not my television, so I was trying to figure it out, and I did, but it was a struggle. We use closed captioning all the time. And that's even just that alone. Sometimes I think we had some students that were approaching us and saying they have some hearing issues, and they usually would get an FM unit, but they're not in the classroom. So how would this work? So we share, listen, turn on the closed caption. Make sure you're wearing headphones. So some strategies to share with families that this is stuff you actually have access to be able to support your child, so.
Absolutely. So let me take you back for a second. And let's say you're working in one of those districts that has yet to build capacity. You just started in, getting the occupational therapist, physical therapist, a speech therapist. You're building capacity there. So when the referral comes, your team is maybe either coaching them or starting to do that.
Yes.
What does that look like? What is when someone from your team comes in, what do they do? And if we can, let me ask that in that sort of multicultural lens. How do I make sure we are selecting and acquiring things that are respectful of the family?
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So the school, let's say, is working on we're building capacity. So school is doing their assessment using the SET framework, which is something from Joy Zabala. It's just a way to assess the student. You look at the student, their environment, and the task and the tools, right? So we asked the school team to basically do a lot of data gathering, use the data you have about the student. You know the student better than we do, because we're not with the student all the time. We're an outside team. Gather all that data, fill out this information, use some checklists, use some of these modified GPAC checklists that we have that were from Georgia. They're for the high incidence and also for writing or reading categories. Okay. And then what happens, they reach out to our team. They call Maricris. And Maricruz will either herself connect with the school, and it may be the OT and the school psychologist, and work with them. Okay, good, you did this. They're reading on this grade level. They're having no trouble with writing, but they have, whatever it is, working through it. And we basically were a part of the capacity building is working with the therapist and the school team to say, hey, I think Johnny needs something that in which he can have the text read back to him, right? So for them to just say, what is the feature they're looking for? That's basically what it is, not the tool, not the specific tool, but identify what is it that you think technology that they need to support the student based on what you have found and based on what you know about the student. And then what we do is Maricruz, or she will assign like a senior mentor, 2 mentors to work with the team first to go over, okay, maybe let's try this tool. Will they have internet access? Is internet an issue? So, because that's going to determine. So I think we've have some students that cannot have access to internet, right? So their cultural situation is they don't use internet. So you would have to find a tool in which it will work not using the internet. Mm-hmm. So in that case, you have to pick the right tool to match that situation. So those are kind of some things is find out, okay, what's the home situation? So finding out from the school, like a little bit of the social background, who's going to be supporting them, and is there any issues with internet? Are there limitations, and et cetera. So I would say that's one piece that we would have to work in when we're working on picking out the tool. But the school team is not expected to know all the tools that are out there, like all the reading tools or all the writing tools. They just kind of have to give us an idea of what you think, and then our team will work with them and say, hey, I think is probably this and this. And then when they're doing that, they actually get to learn a little bit more about the tool, because it's specific. They're not just listening to us talk about it now. They're actually involved with so kind of why we're choosing one tool over another tool for the student. So.
And then I think what leads next is that then they could replicate that for the next student, right? And
yes, ideally, yes. Exactly.
So would you kind of anticipate the way I'm picturing this chart in my head where you're like, we see the referrals go up, 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 and now we've built capacity. We see them go down, 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 because there's these people know what they're doing now. They don't need to contact us. Is that like a goal that you have, or am I putting words in your mouth?
Yeah. So if the goal is to, in a sense, is I think it's kind of, that's part of the goal. That would be a result of this. But I think primarily what's driving this too is to build that capacity for the school teams to be empowered to directly provide some AT support. To be knowledgeable and be comfortable about saying, hey, and for all districts, not just the districts that keep on referring or keep on getting information about assistive technology. Those school districts actually, they've already been doing their own assessments. I have a lot. They have high referrals, and on top of it, I have several schools in those districts already doing the Hyatt cases. Like, they've been going about this. So what we really want to see the shift is, for those school districts to continue doing that, that's great, right? For those school districts, for the referrals for them to handle it on their own, not to have to refer it to us. But in addition, the districts that are not, that previously have no knowledge of the lower referring, to be more empowered and know that we're here to support them. Whether it's to make a referral, because that's what we said. If you don't feel confident despite all of this, it's okay. Refer the case to us and let us come in and show you. The only downside is we're not, as I say during COVID now, is that we don't have that hands-on kind of interaction. Assistive technology is sometimes very hands-on, right? It's a good way to learn for people who are kinesthetic learners. They like to feel and touch, what you're working with. That's kind of missing. So we do it through Zoom and, control, screen share, and giving control to someone to sort of play with it. So, but I think our goal is for every district, every school, to have some sort of person in the building that has some comfort of making a recommendation or for an assistive technology for their high incidence students cases. And obviously you have a student that comes in that has like cerebral palsy or spinal muscle atrophy, that's more access related issues or more complex. Our team is here to continue to provide that support. So
for some very, very specific needs.
Yes. Right? Yeah. And different needs. So complex, more complex needs,
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask, that selection process that you sort of talked about there, is it universal? So, and to be specific there, like this podcast is related to AAC mostly,
Yes.
right? So does that change at all if we're talking about AAC selection, or is it like, no, really, it's the same whether you're thinking of, a student that has dyslexia and we're coming up with reading supports, or we're talking about AAC?
Yes. So for AAC, I think what we're doing is it really depends, so what AAC is for us, what we're doing is the speech therapist that works with the student may or may not have AAC experience, right? So if they do not, it becomes a little more difficult for the team. So I think our team has to come in and assist them more, whether it's either as a consultation or actually do the assessment with them together, So it's I think that is a difference, because AAC is a little bit different. They're really, you can't ask like a school psychologist, like in what's what Lindsay says, a school psychologist doesn't have that language training. Mm-hmm. So for the students that have AAC needs, if they don't have a speech therapist that is very knowledgeable in AAC, we still do the assessment. So our team will still come in, and work with them and develop, and try to work with that speech therapist to develop their skills and provide some training. But we do have some cases in which the speech therapists are very knowledgeable, and they're very capable. So we do that consultative model with them. They pretty much, do the assessment in a sense, and we consult with them to just help them figure out some of the, the nitty gritty,
Totally. It's different levels of support based on their individual personalized needs.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
That sounds really supportive.
Thank you. It's still a work in progress. So we'll see how it looks, I think, next year, how it rolls out, but no, it's great. We have a great team, and
I remember I had such a great time with them. So let me ask you maybe two final questions. So
Sure.
The first one is, if you and Colleen, we can cut this out if you don't want to talk about
it. It's okay. Yeah.
This is, so let me ask you, Colleen, you mentioned at the very beginning when we were asking like who you are and what you do, you also said that you're like, let's take off your working hat and put on your mom hat. You said that you have a child that uses AAC. So can we talk about that from a little bit? What, if you feel comfortable,
Sure.
What's your experience been like? And tell us a little bit about your daughter. What does she use, and how do you work that into your life with work and everything? I mean, that's something so many people who listen to this podcast are wrestling with,
Okay.
So let's start with the past. How did AAC come into your life?
So how did AAC come into my life? Personally, my daughter's name is Zoe. So when she was in early intervention, she has cerebral palsy and she's nonverbal. So she communicates other ways, gestures, contact, eye contact, body movements, and she makes some sounds, but not a lot, So we had great providers in 0 to 3, and I think I also knew about AAC. So I kind of requested an AAC evaluation at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We started working with I think, some simple symbols at home to try, working with the speech provider that was there. Actually, and I think, it was like, have her be able, remember this, the pediatrician says, you need to make sure she's able to answer yes or no to you. Like, so just to start with that, yes or no. Okay, so we worked on that, and it evolved into getting the assistive technology evaluation for AAC. And I was really disappointed because the lady told me at that time, was like, no, Zoe is not ready for, we were going to do eye gaze, of course, because it was an eye gaze evaluation. And they were like, no, she's not ready. And she said, you need to work on her be able to use low tech first. I'm like, okay. And then I'm a PT, I'm very concrete. Let me explain this to you. You didn't understand how hard it was for me to understand AAC. And it took me years. She's 8 right now, and I've taken your course, I've taken yours and Rachel's, and who else? Sarah Gregory. I've taken a lot of stuff on AAC to understand what core words are, because it's just so abstract. It is so abstract that you're like, wait, so what's the symbol for want? What symbol do I use for yes or no? Like, how does she know what it means, right? So I started making my own booklet and made like an eye gaze chart with her, and it had a clear in the middle. I used smaller ones, not the giant ones. And I used like those baseball card holders, I think. So we made a few pages. I started with that. Then the next step was I kind of refused to listen to that lady, and I started researching. Yeah.
Good for you.
I started researching on parent groups for children with cerebral palsy, what AAC app is good for kids with CP. So Proloquo was too hard. That was a very popular one. We looked at one of the old ones from Toby Dynavox. I forgot, Sonic Flex or something.
Sonoflex.
Sonoflex, yeah. I got, and it's free. I downloaded. I was like, okay, no, it was a little too hard for her. It's too small. Touch Chat HD wasn't too expensive. It was affordable. This is all me just doing this on my own. So I got her on Touch Chat and looked online with parent supports and started there. I created her own page. We started with basic things like I want, phrase based. And we were driven, we focus on things that she likes, right? Disney anything, Disney princesses, Disney movies, I want to play with a ball. I want to read a book. And then we added things like, she has a tracheostomy too. So I need to be suction. I need to be changed. I want to lay down. So we built up, and she was able to navigate through pages, like we added on. So she used the Touch Chat for a few years. And then we met her speech therapist at her school, were interested in trying the eye gaze. So that's what happened. So I contacted Toby Dynavox, the rep. I did it on my own as a forget chop. So we worked with the speech therapist at the school, got Toby to trial it with her. And now she has an I-12 and she uses Communicator. She used to use both. So she used to use the Touch Chat at home because the eye gaze was school most of the time. And she used Touch Chat at home, and she used her eye gaze at school. And I also have AbleNet buttons for her that she could press to communicate as well. Like, we use everything. We're not like exclusive, but she's using it. She's using Communicator. We have a classroom board, but she also has a higher, like a board where she's learning to put sentences together. So there's less, it's not phrase based, it's more core words. And we're learning to use it. And I don't know if it was your session or something, we started using her eye gaze during playing games. I remember one of the sessions when I Closing the Gap, I'm like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. So to have her play games, with it, like my turn, your turn, modeling, and she goes saying, I like, you go. So that's kind of where we're at, this crazy journey of AAC. So like I get how difficult it is to explain, but I'm still learning, and I get the core words now and Finn's vocabulary when I didn't get it in the beginning.
Well, that's something that has been reinforced with me doing the podcast now for a number of years, is that every functional user of AAC that I get to talk to on this podcast, or I get to talk to outside of this, they've either said it to me or I've seen them do it, where it's truly an AAC system. So when we say the word system, so many people think, pro quo. They think, communicator, as the system, but really the system, that's one component to the larger system, in the same way that someone who's speaking might, or anyone really, uses multiple technologies to get the task done. Sometimes I use a laptop, and sometimes I use my phone, and sometimes I use a paper and pen, depending on the task. Well, depending on what I'm communicating and with my situation, I might use those AbleNet buttons, or I might use go back to touch chat because I'm familiar with that. And in this moment, that's what's going to work best for me. Or sometimes I'm going to use my communicator, maybe principally, or maybe primarily I'll use this, but I'm still going to use this because that's my whole system, man. Don't take it away. Embrace it,
Yeah, no, it's great. And like, it was weird because when I first started, I kind of thought she had to use just one, like you only can use the eye gaze. And I think it was, I don't know who it was. Someone said to me, you have to allow them to use every which way. You do yes or no like this. We even do that. Sometimes we give her choices with the hand. So this is one thing and this is another. And she will tap that one. She'll also smile as a affirmation of that's the right choice or the right answer. Or she'll give you a dirty look and say, no way. The funniest thing I have to share is that she kicks me out of her speech therapy sessions with her remote speech therapy session with her speech therapist. She used to have this therapist that she really is a male therapist, and she really enjoyed working with him. And she used to just like give me dirty looks or throw herself, and it's like, basically I have to walk out. I can't be in there while she's having session. So she's built up her ability to say to now, you go. And then she looks at me. She uses her eye gaze, go, you go. And then she looks at me and I'm like, okay, so now she can say, which was recent, I like you go. I'm like, okay, bye, honey.
Look at that. Okay, I'll leave. Absolutely.
I'm leaving. I must oblige. I must. So it's really fun to be on this end, and it's funny. She also does yoga with a yoga instructor. She won't use any AAC with that person. She doesn't want to. So it's very interesting. I kind of find that she prefers their body language communication she has, and it's okay. I think that's definitely one thing I've learned is however she wants to communicate is the way, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's her choice. It's her life, right? So yeah, that makes total sense to me. And that is something else I've learned from this podcast, is that code switching is very real from person to person, where I might use more of a certain type of tool with this person. And that often has to do with the person as well. Like imagine going to a yoga instructor that knew AAC and was modeling it all the time. Maybe the outcome would be different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
Imagine it was yoga AAC, or AAC yoga. Maybe there'd be a different comfort level, but hey, you know what? I just want to kind of move my body, and no one else is using the AAC in here, so that makes a lot of sense to me. So let me wrap up with this kind of final question.
Sure.
I kind of like to think about the future and some of someone who is, multifaceted here with both the your PT experience and your administration experience, and working with a diverse team in New York City, and having a family member, your own child. what's your sort of I wonder when it comes to AAC? Like what are you kind of questing after? What are you thinking about? What's kind of got you like, I can't fall asleep because I'm kind of wondering about this, you know? I like to think about that as an educators, is that we're kind of constantly questing for kind of what's the next thing we're curious about. And I'm just curious, what's got you curious?
So I guess that there's two. I think one of them was I was wondering, which is related to the cultural diversity, was more diverse voices. So I've seen more diversity in the AAC symbols with skin color and stuff, which is awesome. I'm so happy to see that. But I'm curious if there's more diverse voices, or even the way. I know like there's Spanish or French speaking, voices, but I just wonder if there's even a more diversity in that, or someone that's speaking with more of like a Haitian accent versus an Indian, like a Hindi accent voice, lending their voice, building. I would like to see that in the AAC world, maybe more diversity in different types of voices. And then the other one is this. So my daughter is these devices. So sometimes the only bad thing is the eye gaze is large. And it kind of impedes, if she has she's working on a power wheelchair driving, it really impedes on her ability to kind of drive and see. So it's kind of like, it's one or the other, So I wonder if the AAC world of making these high-tech devices, that group of people will think about this magical way of, I don't know. I don't know, making that a little more compatible. Let's make it that way. Power, mobility, and AAC use.
Colleen, I got to say, I think that those are noble questions to ask. And I think there are people working on them. In fact, I think there are people working on brain interface, and so that we're controlling the communication device with our neural pathways, our brain waves, which I could see, in the same respect that I can talk and I can drive a car at the same time,
Yes.
And those are maybe I'm activating two different parts of my brain when I'm doing those same tasks, that maybe there's some possibilities there. So that does not sound like science fiction to me. That sounds like science future,
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. So I'm excited to see, and I'm lucky that my daughter is in this time, born, around this time, that she has access to more developing technology, and, so that's a good thing.
Well, Colleen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and spending this time with us, and for all you do, and for sharing the experiences of your team. That's really, I think it's going to help a lot of people kind of help themselves come up with goals for themselves, either for themselves, their own practice, or for the teams they work with. So thank you so much.
All right, sure. No, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me. This was fun.
All right, until next time, I'm Chris with Talking with Tech with Colleen Warn, and we'll see you later.
Okay, bye. See you later.